Happy Monday. Here we are. Nice week in May to be together. And just before we get started, I'm not sure I can see all of you anymore, but I just want you to think for a minute about a team that you work with, a team that you're on, a team that you do your wonderful academic work with.
Are you're sharing the slides?
I will be, yes, but not yet. Are we good?
Yeah.
Is everything okay, guys?
Yes, we're great.
Yes, you're good.
Yeah, there's some delays. I don't want to
I think so.
overinterpret the delays, but they are delays. So I just want to get you into the headspace before we get started here on this idea of appreciative inquiry. And I want you all to think about a team that you work with, a team that you may lead or a team that you participate in to do the work that you do together. And, you can even put this in the chat if you want. What percent of your time within the team is spent on the operations and getting the work of the team done, the actual working aspects, the technical work of the team? What percent would you say of your time is spent doing those things? Oh, 25%, Phyllis. I am envious of you already. Anyone else want to put a number in there? 50. So balanced, Dr. McDonald. My goodness. 50-50. 90% David Music. Yes, we get to be so busy on our team sometimes. 15%. I see some of you do have generous amounts of time to do some of the things that we'll be talking about today, which is great. So let's get started with this little talk. And this will be very much a participatory thing that we'll do together. Let me share, and then we'll get going. All right, there we go. Everyone should be able to see the slides now. I have no conflicts of interest. And here are our session objectives. We're basically going to learn about appreciative inquiry and its potential uses in mentorship, leadership, and teams. And this is really very much an introductory session.
Dean Lehrman, I'm
Yes.
so sorry to interrupt you, but we do not see your slides. I apologize.
All right. Let's try again. Are we good now?
Yes, if you put it in presentation mode, we are golden. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
This is what I get for going through it twice beforehand to be sure everything worked perfectly. And now it's not working perfectly. Okay. So imagining the possible is the first part of this. And there's a lot more we can talk about here, but it's a little bit of a taste for you. Here's my conflict of interest of slide, and here are the session objectives. And we'll talk a lot about these two topics, but we're going to use some kind of experiences together to do that with. And then we'll have you practicing some of the skills that come out of this as well. So I just want you to imagine something for a moment. I want you to imagine that you slept very deeply. And then after you had a really restful sleep, you woke up and 10 years had passed. And that, in the case of this 10-year-old girl, used to be a little baby 10 years ago. But just imagine if you were to go to sleep and you were to wake up 10 years later and you were to feel really happy and affirmed by everything you saw. You looked around and you were just delighted by how things were going, how related you were, how close you were to the people around you on your teams, how empowered you felt, how capable you felt, how validated you felt in your work, and that everything was really clicking along in ways that you hadn't imagined. And then after you had that experience, you start to look around and notice the things that made that possible. So if you were to walk through your work environment, to think about what is it now, 10 years later, and I'm awake now, walking around, what is it around my work day, my work environment that is making me feel that so affirmed, so powerful, so connected to my mission? Imagine, what that would yield if you were to actually do that as a group, have that vision, share your impressions of that vision, and work together to move toward that vision. That's a flavor of appreciative inquiry when we bring it to groups of people to start to unfreeze from the urgencies of our daily lives and start to think about how do we empower the unbelievable human talent around us to move toward our shared and co-created and co-produced goals. This is where appreciative inquiry is very, very powerful. So we're going to talk about this a little bit, first with just some basic definitions. It really is a model that seeks to engage stakeholders in self-determined change. And I guess you can contrast that to a model that seeks to employ stakeholders in change that someone else has determined. And those of us who are curious about change management and change processes, we realize that the more we co-create a self-determined change, the more likely it is to actually be successful and sustained over time. It can be messy, of course, because there's a lot of people who are involved in that process, but it's more likely to be something that results in an enduring change. The premise here is that organizations are really, at their core, a series of conversations. They're not so much org charts, they're not so much technical things. They're really a series of conversations that are limited only by our imaginations and how our imaginations agree on what we should be doing in the future. And so AI advocates that this collective inquiry on the best that we can do is really a very different way of going about our work than to talk more about transactional incentives with coercion or persuasion. So, and we'll get to the truth that you need both, right? But the question is, at what times is one really important, and how do you stay in balance between these two different approaches? So to illustrate this, we're going to take a little bit of a journey back in time. Okay, you may have remembered, some of you may have been alive then, but the others of you will remember how we eventually decided to go to the moon and then how we ended up getting to the moon. So I'm just going to share a couple of clips and that will take us back in time to those important parts of our history. And this is the first one I'll play for you.
There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Wow, folks. Well, here's the other side of this coin.
Houston, we have a problem. We have a main bus being undervolt. We've got a lot of thruster activity here in Houston.
Never have nations of the world.
Oh, there's another master alarm, Houston. I'm checking the quad.
refresh that.
We've got a computer.
Together we can figure this out.
We've got a
When these
thing
things fire together,
We've got multiple caution warning, Houston. We've got a restart.
All right, I'm going to SDS. Say that we must. And then shall we earn.
Like the heart rate just got right.
The eternal plan for mankind.
02
And
tank,
the
not
peace
reading
making.
it all. Tank 1 is at
The eternal blessing of
725 PSI and falling. Fuel cells 1 and 3 are. What's going on with this slide? Let me get back to you. Like GNC. It's like they're all over the place. They keep going close to gimbal lock.
I keep losing radio signals. Why is their antenna must be flat?
22. You're gonna have to do it manually.
This is not
a new weapon.
real power loss here.
Throughout the quadruples there, you have to use by those,
Moved
gotta be instrumentation.
He could not prevail.
Either by persuasion, tunnels, or example.
But inevitably, they fail.
We got a pretty large bang
Either
there.
because men are not afraid to die,
Main bus,
for a white life worth living.
Houston, we have a main bus A undervolt now too. It's reading 25.5. Main bus B is reading SIP right now. We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Look on GNT, these guys are talking about bangs and shimmies up there. Doesn't sound like instrumentation to me.
You can just have to feel.
Just go it. We've been hit by a meteor, we'd be dead by now. Gonna try to get us out of this lurch. Here's the mud. Did you say switch to Omni Bravo? Roger, and the signal straight on the high. What's the story here, Jack? We keep floating with gimbal lock.
Okay, Jim.
That's
SMRCN, helium-1.
Switch to Omni Charlie.
Barbacoa.
Houston, I'm switching over quad C to main A.
All right, well, I think you get the picture here. That these are two different, very different approaches to talking about going to the moon. Okay, so we have the visionary who sets forth this idea of why we should do this and that we're going to do it, move it forward. And then we have the doers who actually have to get it done. And so, I would ask you, how did you feel when you were hearing about this idea from President Kennedy, and then you were dipped into the realities that it took to manage through some of the huge challenges of making this successful? And then I would ask you to think about how much of your typical workday is spent in one or another of these different ways of approaching the work around you. As humans, we are rewarded biologically for the latter, for the problem solving, for the making it through the urgency of that fight or flight survival level problem. And so we get really focused on that in our everyday lives. We make checklists, we do things, we accomplish things. This is how we're wired. And it's a very important part of our identities, particularly in the clinical environment, where you have to balance all those urgencies against other priorities. And it's all good because we need to do it. We need to do it well. But it also comes with some challenges in that we may not spend enough time in a different mode of thinking that allows us to open our minds and collectively open our minds and our time to other possibilities. So next, we're going to learn a little bit about the neuroscience of AI and understand a little bit more about the differences between these two different modes of thought.
Hello, I'm Andy Smith, Appreciative Inquiry Facilitator. Let's talk about the neuroscience of appreciative inquiry. Advances in brain imaging technology from the 1990s onwards enabled researchers to discover two networks in the brain that in some ways are in opposition to each other. The task-positive network is activated when you engage in cognitive tasks, perception, motor control, and problem solving, including logical analysis. It tends to produce stressful feelings, activating the so-called sympathetic nervous system. The network known as the default mode network, on the other hand, enables big picture thinking, engagement, motivation, stress regulation, and social and relationship awareness. It's associated with positive emotions, trust, and feeling supported. The two networks are opposing domains in the sense that when one network is active, it inhibits the other. Analytic thinking fires up the task-positive network, but it also turns off the default mode network. On the other hand, empathic thinking activates the default mode network and suppresses the task-positive network. So a balance between task-positive network and default mode network is essential for open communication, creativity, and working together effectively. We need to have our default mode network active when we're bonding as a team, when we're taking in new information, and especially when we need to come up with creative solutions to challenges. And ideally, after that, we go into task-positive mode to carry out those solutions. Usually in the workplace, we don't have any difficulty in activating the task positive network. We're in that mode most of the time as we work down our to-do list and aim to meet targets and hit deadlines. Unfortunately, the side effects include defensiveness, lack of trust, seeing other people as either a means to an end to get your goals achieved, or as threats or blocks to achieving your goals. Stress, reluctance to try new ways of working, and a focus on short-term results rather than longer-term and bigger picture aims. It's when challenges hit that we most need to go into default mode network to learn from each other and break out of the thinking that led to the problems in the first place. So how to encourage greater activation of the default mode network in the face of the pressures of organizational life? Fortunately, appreciative inquiry encourages default mode network activation and positive emotion in a number of ways. Just being listened to with 100% attention activates the default mode network. When people are asked about their strengths, their achievements, and things they're proud of, they become less defensive and they open up more. It's easier to like and trust other people when they're talking about their best experiences, their deepest values, and their aspirations for the future. When they reconnect with their values, what's important to them, they become more resilient and they have more of a sense of purpose. Emotional resonance. When one person starts to experience the same emotions as another, when like they catch emotions off each other, helps people to bond. Positive emotion helps people to engage their visual creative imagination. Problem-focused approaches emphasize external forces and constraints that can lead to feelings of being judged and self-consciousness. Appreciative inquiry, by contrast, evokes a sense of safety and self-empowerment that encourages new ideas and scanning the environment for possibilities. Now that we know about these two networks, we can see that if you were to get too analytical, as we do in traditional problem analysis mode, you risk flipping your group back into task positive network thinking and shutting down the default mode network that they need to find creative solutions and aspirational goals. This is why in appreciative inquiry, we focus first on what's working and on positive exceptions. Even if they're few and far between, we'll find them if we look for them.
All right, so we've sort of heard about these two different modes in our brains and the tendency to focus on problem solving so much that it actually can inhibit some of the positive aspects that come out of an approach of appreciative inquiry. And so this slide sort of summarizes some of the key differences between these two modes. They're sitting on a scale because they're always to be balanced together. There's not just one or the other that works. But the problem solving arises from a need. We feel the need, we sense the need, we identify the problem, we analyze for causes, possible solutions, we implement planning, we treat the problem, and we can come over time to view our entire organizational life as a problem to be solved. Puts us into a deficit mode of looking for a problem and solving it in order to feel that we've accomplished our goals. The appreciative approach, on the other hand, opens up a world of possibilities by sort of first deciding together through envisioning, listening, identifying strengths, elevating people's sense of the possible, to identifying what is, what might be, what should be, designing what will be, and then embarking on a journey to move toward that aspirational goal. You could see how both would be really important for teams and for organizations to not get too stuck in one, but to take time once in a while to reset that goal through appreciative inquiry and then operationalize that through some of the problem-solving methodologies and ways of thinking that we know how to do. There are 5 steps, according to appreciative inquiry, for maintaining a positive organizational culture. If one were to implement this as part of organizational transformation, you would go to these particular steps. You'd build a coalition of leaders who felt the same way to sort of guide the organization through this change process. You'd form a discovery team that would go out to do appreciative interviews to share with the organization, understand what do people really appreciate about the people they work with, the teams they work with, and the organization as a whole. They would share their positive stories regularly as part of regular items on agendas, checking in with team members before the agenda begins, debriefing afterward, and then having the tasks be that central part of the agenda, but always finding a time to share positive stories. There'd be new habits for incorporating AI into daily work, and some of the additional materials at the end will show you how to do that. And then we'd actually start linking AI to existing performance improvement initiatives, using those tools to envision and co-create new strategies for performance improvement, not only sticking to the whack-a-mole of hitting the problems where they are, but envisioning whole new strategies with a much more creative brain. I had the opportunity to see many of these steps implemented at Indiana University. When I started as the OBGYN chair there, they had already done a lot of this. It hadn't yet percolated into the department that I was the chair of, so we had a real chance to kind of get caught up to the other departments and to start to understand how the institution was evolving in what's called a way of emergent design, in which you move in this direction, and the way it kind of flows through an institution will look different from department to department and from unit to unit. But the appreciative approach will allow people to feel much more creative and aspirational in terms of where they want to go in the future. So one thing I'd like to do is take us a little bit deeper in how to do appreciative interviewing, because that's one thing you can do rather easily to start understanding the value of this whole approach. So we're going to watch this first, and then we're going to practice some of these tools really quickly in a breakout session. So let's just first take a look at the description of this, and then we'll go from there.
Let's look at some different ways you could use appreciative interviews. You can use them in a variety of different ways. One way they can be useful is in one-to-one coaching. When you conduct an in-depth appreciative interview with the coaching client, you'll uncover a wealth of useful information about what works for that individual. By asking what they find important and significant about the stories they've selected, you can discover something about their values and motivations as well. Also, if you take the time to hear multiple stories of best experiences, by noticing what those stories have in common, the interviewee may discover patterns of success that they can reproduce in the future. Another way of using appreciative interviews is for organizational change. An organization could train up maybe 10% of its workforce as appreciative interviewers, who then go through the organization doing in-depth interviews of an hour or more with 9 or 10 other people at different levels and in different departments. In addition to the usual discovery of inspiring stories and identifications of conditions for success, the interviewers are tremendously increasing their understanding of other people's challenges and perspectives. This increased understanding should help communication, trust, and sharing of ideas between different areas of the organization. But people can still do valuable appreciative interviews even without any prior training. Very often when I facilitate an appreciative inquiry process with a team or a whole organization, we'll have tables of 6 to 8 people. If it's the whole organization, you'd want each table to have a mix of people from different departments, different roles, different levels. The aim being to increase understanding of other people's experience and develop new working relationships across departmental boundaries. If we're working with just one team, at the very least, we'd encourage people not to sit next to their best mate at work. We'll give participants an interview sheet with questions that we've crafted around the topic of the inquiry. As well as the questions, the sheets will have space to make notes. I have the participants pair up with someone they don't normally work closely with, ideally someone at a different level and from a different functional area, and ask them to interview each other using the questions on the sheet as prompts. Around 15 minutes each way is enough time to do an interview of this kind. I brief participants that they should go through all the questions with one person interviewing and the other telling their story. then swap roles. Because if they both attempted to answer question 1 together, then both move on to question 2 and so on, they would be dipping in and out of their memory and wouldn't be able to immerse themselves in it so deeply. The other instruction I give participants is this: you're not after bullet points or detached analysis. You're after a story. You'll know when you're doing a good interview when you see the person you're interviewing start to relive the experience and lose themselves in the story, experiencing the same positive emotions they felt at the time. And you'll know when you're doing a really good interview when you find yourself as the interviewer feeling some of those same positive emotions. This process never fails to change the atmosphere in the room as participants feel better recalling their successes, and they start to open up and trust each other as sharing their stories activates their default mode networks.
All right, so I thought it'd be fun to sort of dip into this a little bit. So if you will bear with me and participate in the breakout session that's about to begin, we can actually go through at least one of these questions in your breakout groups. And here are the 4 questions that he showed on the screen. I'll send you all of this afterward. We'll send it out as a PDF for you, so you have all these links. But here, you might concentrate for our breakout session on even just the first question. What's been the best experience of your professional life? Or tell me about a time when your team worked together effectively, or about a time when your team faced a challenge and emerged stronger from it. These additional questions take a little more time. Sometimes these interviews take 20 or 30 minutes, but we're going to ask you in about 5 minutes to sample what it's like to have one of these conversations, focusing on that first question. What's been the best experience of your professional life? We'd like you to you'll be in breakout sessions of just 2 people, and just start with that question. One of you will ask the other the question, give them about 5 minutes to respond to that. You can ask follow-up questions if there's time for that. And then after that 5 minutes focused entirely on the person you asked the question of, you'll reverse your roles. And we'll put a reminder in the breakout room that you need to switch at a certain point. Remember, the goal is to hear stories and to get that person into that mode of telling you the story of the time that they're remembering. So after each of you's tried that in the breakout session, 5 minutes each, we'll stop at 10 minutes and we'll come back together at that time. Well, welcome back, everyone. Nice to see you, and please show us your video if you don't mind. So you just listened to each other for about 5 minutes each, using at least one of the questions that were listed there, with the goal of get people to tell their story, tell you something about what they enjoyed about their work. So first, I hope everyone had a chance to be interviewed and then to do some interviewing. There may have been one grouping of 3 in which there was an observer. But let me just ask, for those of you who were interviewed just for those few minutes, how did it feel to be interviewed? And I know it's a little bit weird because we're not sitting together. This is over a cup of coffee, over a meal. We're actually doing this in the old-fashioned pandemic way right now through Zoom to reach more people, like my old friend, Dr. Smith, who probably couldn't come to Roanoke for just this particular session. Hi, Roger. So how did it feel to be interviewed, folks? The shy ones can put it in the chat if you want to. Others can just speak up, whatever you'd like to say. A relatively small group. So
Well, this is Phyllis Whitehead, and I had the privilege of being interviewed by Dr. Smith. So it was really, it was very natural. The interview of asking questions, it seemed important, and he was very interested, and it was very encouraging to talk more about the experience. So it was like, it was nice to be able to, gosh, I seem like an important person, and he's interested in what it happened, and it felt good at that point and appreciate it. So, I mean, I know it's appreciative inquiry, but it really did.
Great. So you felt, that the opportunity to talk about something that you enjoyed doing in your work, you felt valued and heard. And then that became a very important thing. Then, we have that opportunity with our patients, of course. We always think about that when we interview our patients, those of us who see patients, but we don't often gift each other with that. It can be really powerful, can't it? Dr. Skolnick writes in chat, I enjoyed my time with Dr. Mallory. We knew each other, which helped the interaction. We both related important stories that had special meaning. Well, that is an intriguing word, special meaning. We will not ask for any details, but we're glad that there was meaningfulness out of those interactions. Anyone else wants to talk about the experience of being interviewed?
This is Neil McDonald. I'll gladly mirror what Phyllis has spoken to. I was able to talk to Taran. We knew each other just rather superficially, but we've both been involved in some very, very important fundamental changes that have gone in here at Virginia Tech early. And it was great to again feel like, wow, this is, we are some, important people doing important things. And it was good. I don't often get to talk about that from my own personal perspective, and I appreciated it.
Thank you for sharing that, Neil. Did anyone have something to share about asking the questions? How did that feel?
I felt asking the questions were pretty straightforward. As a physician, I'm used to asking colleagues and patients, and so I didn't find that asking those questions were at all uncomfortable or challenging.
Great. Thank you, Taran. Any of the folks that aren't familiar with this kind of questioning, that it was new for them, if that's true, how did it go for you?
I feel like it was a really great opportunity to ask like positive questions. I feel like a lot of times with patients and patient care, you're working on something that could be better, or getting to a specific place, and so not having an agenda and having questions in a positive light and framework was pretty refreshing.
Yeah, thank you, Greta. It's amazing. We're surrounded by, gosh, an enormous potential, the untapped potential of us when we get into this mode of not thinking about deficits, but thinking about assets, and thinking about all the things, all the skills we bring to the work, and all the human potential that we have together. Even spending a few minutes doing that can really remind us of all of that positive potential that we have, and get us out of a mode that we can tend to go into deficit mode, right? And this is true all the time, but of course it's true now that we're coming out of a pandemic, and we're trying to get our volumes back and our margin to recover, and all those things that we all know are challenging us right now. And some deficits are perceived and some are actually real, right? So we've got real deficits in addition to what some people may perceive as deficits. And it's very helpful to actually spend some time thinking the other way, thinking about all the potential we have within the space around us, which continues to recover, but all the things that we can do together, and start planning for the future, for when the resources are available, and what should we be doing with those resources when the time comes. That future-oriented thinking and envisioning that we can do about the future has value right now, as well as helping inform us about the future. Just a few more things to share with you, which we'll go back to sharing now. So we've already talked about these particular questions. And I guess some of the take-home points here are really to remember that in default mode, the mode we were just practicing, it's about the stories we create, where we appreciate strengths, envision aspirational possibilities. And then we, of course, have to switch into the task positive mode, the one that we spend so much time in, to identify how to move forward toward that vision, toward those stories, or to address the very real problems that we have and we need to avert a negative outcome. And so this may be a way of remembering that, remembering John F. Kennedy's speech, remembering the movie or the reality if you live through it, in terms of Houston, we have a problem, and everything that that happened to try to prevent the horrible end of that particular mission. So all of this is part of the same kind of, we need both. We need them in balance. We need them at the right times and for the right purposes. As organizations, we need them. As people, we need them. On teams, we need them. And so this becomes something that you can put into your toolkit as a leader, as a team member, and without any recipe to follow, just a bunch of tools that sit there for you, ready to use them if you wish to. And some of them are listed here. Appreciative check-ins or debriefs at meetings that you lead at the beginning or at the end. Asking individuals to respond to an appreciative question when you are introduced to them. So if you're introduced to someone and saying, so what's going well for you today? Or, what something that you'd like to tell me about what's going well in your life. Asking team members to share something positive they observed about an others. And we've seen this a lot lately with the kind of shout outs of different team members that happens. We have opportunities within the medical school and Carilion Clinic to do this regularly, to give shout outs to each other. Appreciative questions with patients, instead of a patient is admitted to the hospital or coming to an outpatient setting for care, generally because they have a problem to solve, right? And that's why they come to us, to help them solve the problem. But try some appreciative questions with your patients and you'll see that them light up in a different way than you might have otherwise not had the opportunity to observe. Assuming positive intent is a way of getting curious when something is confronting you in which you're tempted to draw an inference, make a conclusion, not necessarily look for more information. That little thing inside you which says, let's get curious and understand this better, because there's probably a large number of opportunities to understand this differently than just the negative thing that I'm assuming happened here. That is an example of using an appreciative approach as well, to assume that people stumble. They may not intend to do harm to us in certain ways, but everyone has a bad day, that kind of thing. Finding the value behind the complaint. And I try to do this too. Some folks will register and complain, and I'll my initial response to that will be something that's familiar to me. But then I'll say, let's dig deeper. There may be some truth there that is part of a truer truth, a way of understanding the whole more accurately, because things are actually way more complex than they seem most of the time. So how do we build out our understandings to find value in something that at first doesn't seem to quite make sense to us? And then transforming an obstacle into an opportunity. Doors open, doors close. Things that slow us down may end up being better for an organization rather than only being challenging for them. So how to constantly kind of recreate that understanding and not get pulled back by some of those obstacles and obstructions, but try to how to pivot around those and take advantage of that opportunity to think a little bit more clearly about the direction you're heading in. So here's some things that we can do, and I would encourage everyone to think about something that they'd like to implement in their actual practice of appreciative inquiry. So we set out to do these things today, these first two things, and then in addition, the bonus was that we had some practice telling stories about things we enjoyed about our work, and now you can tell that story to others and how you experienced AI in this session, and also how you envision using it in the future. You'll see some links here that will be circulated to you after the session is over, and they can take you to various different assets here. Some come from the AMA, American College of Physicians, the founders of this movement, Cooper Ryder, the AAMC, and their Leading Organizations to Health program, which very much emphasizes these principles, and some really good work in the Journal of General Internal Medicine as well that describes how this can transform institutions. And finally, I'm really appreciative that you came today. I see you, I appreciate you, and I am grateful for you. It's not just Ted Lasso who feels that way. I feel just the same. So with that, we will end the presentation. Let me get back into stop sharing mode. And we have a few moments for questions. If anyone would like to know what else we can do with appreciative inquiry, there's a lot we can do. If anyone wants to bring this into a meeting, wants to have an experience like the deep sleep experience or exercise I started with. That little baby who went to sleep and woke up 10 years later and looked around and said, "Isn't this a wonderful world? How did we get here?" You can do this in organizations. You can do this at faculty retreats, at team retreats. You can help people get out of that deficit mode and problem-solving mode and actually harvest their vision of what that looks like in the future. Define working groups around that vision, and then ask people to just, according to their interests, dedicate some time to whatever working group they want to be on to try to move that agenda forward toward that vision. This can happen in ways that are only that, or it can be part of a larger organizational change. So if you wanted to do anything in your team around a deep sleep exercise, where you sort of generate what does that vision look like and start working on how do we get there, I'd be happy to help you out. If you want to reach out to me, we can talk a little bit about how we could do that. If you want me to come to some of your units, I've done this before to help facilitate some of that, feel free to do that as well. You can tell it's probably a lot more potent in person than by Zoom. So we tend to recommend that at the right time when you want to do that. I would just think about whether you want to go little, medium, or big on this, because I think there are enormous opportunities in any organization, including Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine and Carilion Clinic, to really start to practice some of this as a regular habit. And I would say this even without, and I have, even before a pandemic, even when there isn't a financial challenge. I would say this at any time, because what we get pulled into is problem solving, and that leads to more deficit oriented thinking. And we just have to get into the habit of periodically taking a deep breath, reflecting, and counterbalancing that with a sense of where are we going. And if leaders aren't doing that on your team, if then it's harder to do, but it's not impossible. In the business world, there's something called the positive deviant. Doesn't that sound interesting? The positive deviant is a person or a unit in an organization in which they shouldn't be able to be successful, but they are, because there's some fundamentals that are challenging in the organization that would challenge any unit to be able to succeed. But if you look carefully enough within an organization, and then using this appreciative approach, you will find these little gems, these units that have somehow built armor around the other things and have gotten really creative and have been able to be successful despite some of the challenges that everyone is facing. You really learn a lot from those groups too. So, and you, the leaders in front of me, can try to do those same things in your units and really help people feel connected to a shared purpose and supported and appreciated. Sometimes that's the best we can do is within the units that we control. Of course, my commitment as the dean is to help anyone do this anywhere they want, because I think it's ultimately better for the organization. And when we co-create that future, we actually probably are going into a better direction than if a single leader tries to articulate that all by themselves. So what leaders do is they set a general direction and a general course, but the specifics of how we get there and exactly where we're going can be set by the larger group. And that's the exciting part of leadership. It makes it a little more challenging, of course, for everything to emerge that particular way, but it's what keeps recharging my batteries every day. And I think that as you start implementing appreciative inquiry in your practice, in your leadership, that you will find a different experience of coming to work every day also. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions before we depart. I getting the thumbs up there. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Appreciate that. Applause, animated applause. I can't hear it, but I appreciate it anyway. Thank you so much, everyone. And this is called part 1 because there can be other parts as well. So if there's an interest, you'll give your feedback to the folks that teach. And if some folks want to do the deep sleep exercise or something like that, we can do that next time if anyone's interested in that, or any of the other tools that we might introduce.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dean Lehrman. And as Dean Lehrman said, if anybody has any questions or follow-up or would like to connect with him to bring appreciative inquiry or any aspects of it to your department or smaller group, please contact us and we will make that happen. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate it
everyone.
all.
Bye-bye.